I'm Chris Schnee, and I write science fiction and fantasy. Today, I'm trying the upcoming game Ashes Without Number by Kevin Crawford. I have played several of the previous games in the series. This is a post-apocalypse one, covering scenarios ranging from zombie apocalypse to civil war. The default setting is linked to the other games in the series, taking place after a psychic disaster on a spacefaring Earth, but it can be used in other ways. What exists so far is a rough draft available to Kickstarter backers. Its rules are very similar to those in the other games. This time there is a focus on survival in ruins, a mutation system, and a settlement building system. I'm familiar with these other games, so I'm interested in seeing how this one will play out. What will my character be? I'm using the standard character stat array because I hate rolling for stats. Here I've got a high intelligence score and a low wisdom score. PCs in this game have a background, and I'm choosing crafter in this case. He is some kind of smith or tinker. He gets a skill called Fix for repairing and building things. There isn't yet an established crafting system in this version of the game. I then get to either choose 2 benefits or roll for 3 semi-random ones on my choice of tables. I will tolerate rolling in this case. I get the Connect skill for socializing, +2 to any physical stat, and trade skill. I can work with that, seems reasonable. Putting together what I've got, this looks like someone who has made contacts to get materials and sell what he builds. I'm also raising his dexterity. Here are his final stats. He's got some dexterity for fighting and dodging things, and he is not very perceptive. I am naming this character Aaron, A-R-I-N, after a completely unrelated character for no particular reason. I get one more free choice of skill, and I choose Stab, so he is good at combat. Next, I have to pick a set of edges, which are special abilities. I'm going with a mix of the warrior and expert classes from the other games. You will have Veteran's Luck, the ability to force a combat roll to be a hit or a miss once per fight, and you will have Masterful Expertise, the ability to re-roll 1 failed skill check per scene. Each character also gets an ability called a Focus at first level. These are powerful special abilities that work differently from the edges. I'm going with one called Shocking Assault, which increases his stab skill further and his ability to do damage against lightly armored opponents. So he's going to have more combat ability. How about equipment? He's a starting adventurer and he has experience in crafting, so I'm going to let him have a scrap metal sword made from rebar and some armor made from scavenged sporting gear like football padding. To give this guy a basic starting scenario, I'm going to say that he fled his home enclave recently due to religious differences. In particular, they got contacted by a group calling itself the Followers of the Still Lady, who promises free stuff to any settlement that will bow down. Aaron had a strong sense these guys are bad news, and left with what little he could carry. He's got a few days of food and water on him, along with that crude armor and a slightly rusty sword. He's not really a great wilderness guy, so he needs a new home where he can work and earn food. That's why he's adventuring. Here is an improvised character sheet for him, based on the Stars Without Number character sheet. The portrait here is AI stuff. Looks like the AI chose to give him an actual intact football, because I said football padding. Okay, sure. He's a football enthusiast. Wait, I'm playing as a human? Huh, seems so. I'm leery of the mutation system here for reasons that I'll mention at the end. I'm going to put this guy, Aaron, through some kind of short adventure. First, I will randomly generate an encounter location. There are tools for this in the beta. For the location type, I get Heavy Industry. And what special features has it got? I get Fearsome. The description says, gory trophies meant to scare off intruders were placed here. Oh, that's an encouraging start. What about the past of this place? The tables and my dice tell me this place was important once, but in a subtle way. The last permanent occupants left recently. They were the direct heirs of the original owners. They left because they found someplace better. Bandits and marauders frequent the area, and the site is taboo to the locals. So putting all that together, I say, this is an old factory known to Aaron's enclave. The fact that there were a bunch of skeletons on display tended to keep people out. It's a good no solicitation sign. Aaron is desperate enough now that he decides to test the theory that might be abandoned now. Maybe there's something good here. He travels to the place through some dangerous wilderness and makes it there. I'm not playing out the wilderness travel right now. He scouts out the ruins of this factory, hoping for either valuables or survivors who won't eat him. So now I need to know if anybody is home. There's a role for that. I'm going for a science fiction apocalypse setting, so I'm flavoring it with that. I get one group of occupants, outcasts. That is potentially good. I'm also going to roll on an occupant details table. This tells me it's a big group, which gives me 15 people on another die roll. They will arrive after the PCs have left. That makes them pretty irrelevant, doesn't it? Huh? I can interpret this as they're not at home right now, but there might be stuff left behind. Their structure says they have several leaders who cooperate uneasily. They currently feel rich and safe. They're sure they're being stalked. Yes, that's not consistent with the previous statement. And they are here to attack prior occupants. What I make out of this random die roll stuff is they're not home because Aaron unwittingly passed them on the way here. This group is heading for Aaron's old town to raid it. They're doing this because they learned about this still lady cult, and it scares them. It should, if you know anything about the game that I'm drawing that from. Aaron is unaware of this as he enters the factory. At this point, I don't have full details about how to run an exploration trip. I should be rolling for a second feature of the factory, I forgot to do that, and I get cratered. So this place is bombed out. Now I'm supposed to have a couple of regions within the site that cover logical parts of a factory. Let's say there are offices, a production floor, which I'll break into 2 areas, a loading dock, and a break area. So 5 distinct areas. In the set of rules, there is not a notion of a specific maze layout, though there are unpublished rules for larger sites that probably imitate the rules within Worlds Without Number. The book's advice here says to use a simple sketch of the regions within a site. I will put together a not quite literal image using software called Dungeondraft and gives you some idea of the room layout. Let's say Aaron enters through the loading dock. It's a big open area with several slots for trucks to arrive. One of these has been broken open. I'm going to roll a 50% chance of a hazard for each zone and randomly make them an environmental threat or some rearguard or trap left by the inhabitants. For the loading dock, I get an environmental threat of a malfunctioning fire suppression system that will emit choking gas if triggered. Aaron has no real reason to set it off, though. Why would he? There's a pair of doors up ahead. It's dark in here, but for light coming through holes in the ceiling. He gingerly pushes open a door and reaches a large factory production area with rusted equipment everywhere. Nothing shows up as a hazard here. He likely sees signs of recent life here. How much information does he get? I'm making a wisdom plus notice check, something he's not very good at, and his die roll is absolutely terrible, giving him a total of 1 on 2d6. That's so bad that I will force there to be a hazard, which is a container sitting around, a perfectly harmless container that he should try opening for treasure. Looks tempting. And I don't know how to handle this as a solo player. I'm going to say Aaron thinks to leave it alone for the moment and move on and come back to it later. In the break room, there is no hazard. Aaron rolls well this time for noticing things. Here, he finds some of the loot common to this type of place, and there are some tables for recommending what sort of loot there should be. Because it's a factory, the dice tell me there is a total of 2 large units of materials and just 1 small individual item, which again is some kind of raw material. As a crafter, Aaron thinks this is great. He'd like to grab as much of it as he can carry and take it along as a trade item. Only some of it ought to be in this break room, so I'll say that he has located a cache of useful, valuable materials he could take. Right now, he's going to press on and continue searching. He moves on to the other production area. Here, there is an environmental threat of live electric wires attached to something. And again, I'm not sure how to handle the idea of whether Aaron is foolish enough to interact with it. I'm going to break out my cards from the Game Master's Apprentice set for more information about this threat. I get the phrase Unearth Angelic Counsel and the item Handy Tools. This suggests that Aaron either finds some interesting old documents tempting him or a very helpful warning sign. Which is it? Roll low or high, and I get low. Well then, Aaron sees some valuable-looking stuff, which looks like it will tempt him to explore near some wiring. He gets to make a notice roll, and he gets a whopping 2 based on his stats. Okay then. For a factory, we're told that this electrical hazard should do 3d6 damage. I'm going to give Aaron one last break here by having an evasion save for half damage. He just barely makes the save with a 14. Still, the damage roll is 12. Half damage is 6. He has 5 hit points. Result? Aaron sees some valuable-looking tools. He creeps too close to the wiring, and he gets blasted with bolts of electricity from live wiring. He has no real defense against this. Later, the raiders will find this foolish explorer dead on the floor of their factory home. Well, that's the end of my campaign. So, what did I make of this? First of all, having a lone character with bad perception is not great for your survival chances, especially in the post-apocalypse. I put this whole thing on hard mode, really, by playing as a solo character as opposed to a whole party. Also, I forgot to try using that reroll ability for perception, which would have been a great idea, might have saved Aaron's life. It could have helped. Second, I'm not quite sure yet how to handle this type of exploration. In other campaigns where I didn't have a pre-drawn map, I used random generation rules of several types. From the game Godbound, I got descriptions of room features and hazards. If you've read my novel Wavebound Sanctum, there's a very early scene in there that was based on rolling up a deep vertical shaft with a protective measure that's unreliable. You can actually see how that plays out in the story. From Worlds Without Number, I got tables for generating directional rooms containing monsters, hazards, and other interactive features. From Ironsworn Delve, I got a more abstract system for making progress toward a goal and seeing useful, dangerous things along a linear path. And from my Game Master's Apprentice cards, I got evocative phrases, icons, and yes-no answers. Why did I have trouble deciding on what happens here, then? Part of it was that I'd rolled in advance that nobody was home, and so there were no monsters to fight, no raiders to shoot, anything like that. The hazards were all of the type of, avoid this or you'll probably die. Lighting and time usage weren't things that I took into account here. The lack of people meant no reaction rolls or negotiation. There was not really any opportunity to use the non-combat skills. In the session, I didn't get into settlement building, something that apparently is a big part of the plan to finish game. I'd be interested in trying that. How about the mutation rules? I took a look at that, and I felt it made for some oddly weak characters. You spend one of your only 2 starting edge choices on it, and it actually makes your base stats worse. And in return for spending that and getting the penalty, you get either 2 random abilities, or your choice of 1, plus 1 random, plus a random harmful one. It's a step away from being able to design a character that you want to play, since it strongly encourages you to let the dice decide. As you saw, I chose my stats because I really didn't want to be defined by totally random die rolls. I was willing to roll for my starting skills, but I was not really comfortable with having the character's mutations and body stuff be defined by total randomness. This may be a pet peeve, but imagine I would randomly roll up like horrible venom jaws, and I walk away from the table saying, I don't want to play this character. So mutation is something that kind of bothers me in how the rules currently work. It might change, I don't know, and I can still play as a regular human and still have other benefits. Overall, Ashes Without Number is meant for characters who are weaker than the series' other games. I won't get into the exact number crunching here, other people have done that better, but if you try to build a warrior, for instance, you're going to be weaker than the warrior class in the other games, especially at lower levels. That even goes for the previous game, Cities Without Number, which had a cyberpunk theme. That one used weaker characters on the assumption that you're also going to get cyber hardware, which will give you implanted guns and armor and stuff. Here, you don't have that advantage at all, so you're overall a pretty weak character compared to a fantasy adventurer or a science fiction one. That may be what you enjoy, playing more of a struggling survivalist, somebody who would not survive being shot in the head. My own usual preference is for higher-powered characters, so this is a different experience for me. I might be able to get into it, especially if I get into a group game, but it's going to be different. Also, because there are a lot of custom potential options, you can even combine the other games in the series. So if I really want to, I can import my heroic psychic otter character from a Stars Without Number campaign into this one, and stomp all over the setting as a Mary Sue. That's certainly an option. Anyway, Ashes Without Number is a Kickstarter campaign as I write this, and I will give a link to that. You might like that or any of its sister games in the Without Number family, along with Godbound. I'm Chris Schnee, and here are some of my books. Right now, I'm working on writing a fantasy story set in a wild geothermal zone. As for role-playing stuff, I want to get back to my fantasy campaign in the Chronicles of Eris setting with my Ratfolk duo. The writers of that setting are doing a Kickstarter project right now for a new Robots vs. Monsters game, so check that out too. I'll also give you a link. That's all for now. Thanks for listening.